Black First, Land First has partnered with former President Jacob Zuma's Umkhonto weSizwe party. Earlier this week, the parties reached an endorsement deal during a meeting in Nkandla, KwaZulu-Natal. Just 1 month after the party's formation, the MK has attracted the African Congress for Transformation, the All-African Alliance Movement and the Pan-African Congress. BLF President Andile Mqotama is in studio with us to tell us more about the alliance. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this morning. Maybe we can start with exactly that, how it came to be that you are endorsing the MK party and why.
The nation is probably aware that Black First, Land First has always stood with President Zuma. In 2015, we started a campaign to say, hands off Zuma, economic transformation now. So when he endorsed Umkhonto weSizwe, we believe, looking in the political situation in the country, there's a reconfiguration of politics. The right wing is organized, and in fact, if you listen to the Democratic Alliance, it says it will vote with the ANC of Ramaphosa. So the right wing is absolutely organized. The left wing is one which is disorganized, and the radical economic transformation has to be carried by a very organized majority left movement. And when President Zuma endorsed Umkhonto weSizwe, we said this is the opportunity to reorganize the left in a sense so that we defeat the right wing, which maintains the apartheid status quo. You know, President Ramaphosa was given 1 billion rand by white monopoly capital for that ANC conference where he bought those votes, obviously. What do you do with 1 billion rand? Why did they do that? They did that to arrest the possibility of radical economic transformation becoming true, which would have pushed for land redistribution, pushed for the economic transformation, pushed that we get real benefits from the mining sector, including the financial sector and manufacturing. So we are at this point now, very exciting, with the possibility of rearticulating a left agenda.
What has disallowed the left wing to be organized or from being organized?
I think the biggest sickness of black leaders is that I want to be the president. I want to lead. This has robbed us of the possibility to work together. Even now, some of the parties that President Zuma has met, they are not talking about voting with Umkhonto weSizwe. They're talking about some possible meeting of roots after the elections. That is suicidal. That is fracturing the radical vote and the right-wing vote as a bloc. I mean, they only have the DA and the Freedom Front plus white people, for instance. We, on the other hand, of the more than 300 parties registered, the majority of them are black parties. So the one weapon we have to transform South Africa is our numerical strength as black people. But this is being completely decimated, fractured by this multiplicity of mushrooming parties sponsored by our enemy, so that we don't consolidate our votes, so that we can have real political power.
Who is your enemy?
White monopoly capital, which I call land thieves, headquartered in Stellenbosch, represented in person by the Oppenheimer family and Johan Rupert.
Is it possible, and please forgive my ignorance, is it possible for black people to be black people's own enemies? When you take a look at us 30 years into democracy, what has this allowed for there to be land, for land redistribution to happen, for instance? What has disallowed for the economy to change, for instance?
You see, the ruling class in any society is those who own the means of production. Now, black people don't own the means of production. We have political power, but this political power is obviously constrained by those who own the means of production. And our political leaders, just like slavery would not have happened if they did not find collaborators who are willing to work with them. But you don't blame collaborators for slavery. You have to blame the enslavers who benefited from slavery and took our people away from the African continent. Just like in South Africa today, most of these political parties are funded and controlled by white monopoly capital and global forces. And that means you can have, in the 21st century, white supremacy needs a bit of melanin. So they're using these house Negroes, if you like, to perpetuate their project. Why would, for instance, white capital give a black man, Ramaphosa, 1 billion rand to buy an ANC conference? They need the black face to perpetuate their economic domination over the black majority. So you have a captured political leadership in the African continent, by and large. Those who stood up against the colonialists are normally murdered, assassinated, and we can see in South Africa they are criminalized, as with the example of President Zuma.
When you listen to some people, more so in the wake of the formation of the MK party, people are asking themselves, but what is it that the former president will do now that he failed to do then? And I guess the measure is taking a look at the black condition, right? What is your understanding of the black condition in 2024 and his contribution towards changing the black condition when he was in power?
President Zuma was kicked out of power precisely when he turned to the left. He was talking about land expropriation without compensation in Parliament. He called for black parties to unite, to use our majority to get the land back. In fact, Thabo Mbeki wrote a whole 30-page document denouncing President Zuma's call for black unity. Not only that, we saw that he made sure that there was free education. He, together with Msebenzi Zwane, brought a very radical mining charter, which said in a year's time, 30% of the mining rights must be given to black people. Over 50% of boards of mining houses must be represented by black people and black women. So there was a clear move. He then strengthened the BRICS process to hold the Western control and influence over the developments in our countries. So he was clearly moving towards the left, and that is what terrified global capital. That is why global capital, people like Lord Robin Renwick, got involved in South African politics, got involved with the whole Zuma must go movement. Johan Rupert himself had supported that movement. So President Zuma was moving towards the left. He announced a radical policy, and that is why he was removed. When he was not doing all this, he was a cool guy. He was loved and probably protected.
Black first, land first. Are you a political party? Are you a movement?
We are a movement involved in politics. We have a slogan that says, use politics to end politics. Because politics as we understand them today is about a coterie of political leaders that serve the interests of themselves first and those who handle them. So we need to end that kind of politics and introduce a politics that represents the interests of the people. But you can't change society without getting yourself involved in politics. It has to, however, be radical politics, ethical politics, politics that put black people first. And that's what we hope we can engender in the MK party.
What is part of the agreement for you to endorse the MK party? What is it that the Black First, Land First movement went to Nkandla to say that these are the agenda items that we are looking to champion?
Well, firstly, we all agreed on a minimum program of radical economic transformation, which includes things like land expropriation without compensation, which includes free education, which includes the mining charter so that black people can benefit from the economy, a massive redistribution of wealth from the white minority to the black majority, and free education. So these are known elements of the radical economic transformation program, which is a minimum program that we believe all progressive peoples and organizations should subscribe to. So we are there to support this radical economic transformation agenda.
What do you say, Mr. Mkutama, sir, to people who say it's been 30 years and we've heard that rhetoric almost every single year, if not almost every single day, yet spatial planning, for instance, has not been addressed, the way in which people live in Malokshini, in the rural areas. And so what needs to happen, maybe let's start with one, the issue of spatial planning. What has this allowed for this country to make sure that people live in dignity?
Well, it is politics. The ANC has failed to transform South Africa. It has failed in all aspects. And when President Zuma, towards the last stanza of his presidency, tried to make things happen, he was kicked out of power. So we must admit that the ANC has failed in the last 30 years. The people who benefited from the ANC rule is the white minority. It is ironic that parliament, for instance, is a black-dominated parliament. But the policies that are emerging from that parliament are pro-white. So it shows that there is no black agenda that drives what black leadership is doing. That's what we must certainly bring to the table and enforce and monitor its implementation. We have no other option but to get the 14 million unregistered young people to rescue us from the clutches of the ANC and the DA government. Because this is where it's going. The DA has already said it will vote for Ramaphosa. The right wing, as I say, is organized and it's willing to perpetuate the current status quo. But there are 14 million young people who are not registered to vote. The ANC got only 10 million votes in the last elections. So the biggest party in South Africa is the unregistered young people who must be brought into the political system and vote for a party that will change their lives and make sure the future is black.
Water and sanitation. There are people, the Water and Sanitation Minister has been bemoaning mayors, councillors for not making sure that there is clean drinking water in some areas of South Africa, where there was an admission that there are officials who are drinking bottled water because they cannot drink the water that comes out of the taps, that they have been tasked with making sure that when you open it, there's proper water. And so water and sanitation, what is the idea there? What is the idea at municipal level where people can see that things are working, the tap is working, the lights are working, and we're not just talking about load shedding, because there are people who load shedding has been a part of their lives for all of their lives.
Yeah, but it's not right. It cannot be right that in South Africa, where God gave us so much coal, you have people without electricity. It is a serious criminal sin, in my view. But also the fact that we don't have water, people are dying from cholera in South Africa, shows the 30 years of ANC rule have not prioritized the well-being of black people. It has instituted an anti-black policy and practice and made our politicians to be petty, corrupt people, because we do not have access to the economy. But also because there is no philosophical thinking of government that puts black people first, that loves black people, that protects black people. So you have, in a sense, the reincarnation of an apartheid type rule in South Africa under the ANC. And when President Zuma, as we say, with some of his comrades, tried to turn things around to make sure that the interests of black people are put first, he was kicked out of power.
It would sound, Mr. Mkutama, and do correct me if I'm wrong, please, that former President Jacob Zuma is now being crystallized into a martyr and into a victim. Was he incorruptible? Did he not also fall victim to being captured? And we're not even talking just about the Guptas or state capture, but was he incorruptible? Was he the blueprint of what leadership should be?
Well, what we know is that his policies, the ones that he articulated at the time that he got attacked and the whole Zuma Must Go movement was sponsored, is when he was moving the country towards addressing the interests of black people. And by the way, it's not just in South Africa. We look at what happened in Brazil. The Brazilian president, who was doing exactly what President Zuma was trying to do, was put in jail under the auspices of corruption, fighting corruption. You know, in South Africa, the biggest corrupt family is the Gupta family in the national imagination because of the white-owned media. The biggest corrupt people here is Marcus Jooste of Steinhoff, who disappeared more than 300 billion rand. And he's been sitting at his home there in Stellenbosch. Not only that, as we speak today, we're all complaining correctly about the Gupta's landing in the key point. But the Oppenheimer family went to the ANC, not government, went to Ulutuli House and demanded their own private international airport inside OR Tambo International Airport. They have it. It's called Fireblade. So a family can get its own international airport within an international airport, and that is not considered corruption. Because, see, South Africa's dominant ideas are white ideas, and it is so easy to paint black people as corrupt, as incompetent. Of course, some of them are. The ANC has been providing a lot of data for this kind of anti-black thinking. But the truth of the matter is that the most corrupt remains still white capital, and they are the biggest beneficiaries of the ANC rule, and that is why they're putting money together to maintain their rule through the ANC.
Has the ANC been all that bad? Is there no good story to tell?
We are landless 30 years later in our own country. What is good about that? We are refugees. We are like refugees in South Africa. We are packed in township and squatter camps. We remain the poorest in a country where God gave us so much mineral resources. Not a single person in South Africa should be poor. God has given us these minerals, which we should all be enjoying. What has the ANC done with that? Nothing. It gave us load shedding. That is its biggest achievement, I think.
Your movement has attached itself to another or other political formations. And so what is it with this political formation that will convince you that you are in it for the long haul? And now we're talking about the actual results, I guess. Do you have to be in government to make a change? Do you have to be sworn in to make a change in people's lives? When you take a look, maybe if you go to the taxi ranks, you go to the markets, you go to spaces where people are, and you take a look at the squalor and the hopelessness that is there in some spaces, do you have to be elected to make a change?
Political power is the answer to our problems. That is why white people created a fake majority by excluding us from the political process, and then they make laws such as the Land Act, which said 87% of the land will be in white hands. It was using political power to address the white interests. I can't see another way out of addressing the historically created backlog in black lives, which is not politically driven. We need state power to use the state machinery to address the problems of black people. Our problems are real big. They need the state to solve them.
How can the rest of the continent help? Do we collaborate enough with the rest of the continent?
Well, we don't, and that is one of our biggest downfalls is the African people. We need a better collaboration within the continent. We need to protect our economies. I mean, Africa, for instance, is one of the producers of biggest mineral resources to enrich the world, but Africa remains poor. So we need to change that kind of thinking, but it starts here. It starts in South Africa. We can create a society which is caring, which redistributes its wealth to its people, take care of its people, and then this will be a great example for the entire African continent.
So we take it that going forward you'll be campaigning, going door to door for the MK party?
Yes, we are saying Pambiling MK.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this morning. Andile Mqutama is the president of the Black First, Land First movement, which has joined forces with the MK party. Ngosi.